Oh. Oh, look, the camera started recording by itself. I guess it probably thought the top of my head was me holding up my hand like, hi, you want to start recording now? Hi, YouTube. Welcome to this video that started as a surprise to me. We're going to be reading, as we have been, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. It's been a nice, surprisingly good book. There's been a little bits here and there that are like, a little dated, but it is a book set in the 1800s, so we take what we can get. Today we're going to be moving on and reading chapter 19, Morbid Slumber, which sounds like it's going to be a very, very happy chapter. What do you think, Parkstopher? Do you think that this is going to be a happy chapter? It's called Morbid Slumber. I think that Morbid Slumber is probably a good thing. I think I'd love to take a morbid slumber sometimes. Anyway, it was a little bit shorter of our normal little intro, but I'm going to get into this. Chapter 19, Morbid Slumber. The following day, the 10th of January, the Nautilus resumed its course under the water, but at a remarkable speed, which I could not estimate at less than 35 miles an hour. That is, I guess that's quite fast for a submarine. 35 miles an hour doesn't sound like a lot, but I guess water is pretty thick. We headed west for several days. The days fled rapidly away, and I counted them no longer. Ned, according to his custom, tried to vary the fare on board. Veritable snails, we had become accustomed to our shell, and I affirmed that it is easy to become a perfect snail. I'd love to be a perfect snail, Jewel. Sure thing. This existence then appeared to us easy and natural, and we no longer thought of a different life that existed on the surface of the terrestrial globe, when an event happened to recall us from the strangeness of our situation. On the 18th of January, the weather was threatening. The sea was rough. The wind was blowing a strong gale from the east, and the barometer, which had been going down for some days, announced an approaching war of the elements. I had gone up to the platform at the moment the first officer was taking his bearings. I expected, as usual, to hear the daily sentence pronounced. But that day it was replaced by another phrase not less incomprehensible. Almost immediately I saw Captain Nemo appear and sweep the horizon with his telescope. This seems like it's probably fine. For some minutes the captain remained immovable, without leaving the point enclosed in the field of his object glass. Then he lowered his telescope and exchanged about 10 words with his officer, who seemed to be a prey to an emotion that he tried in vain to suppress. I looked carefully in the direction they were observing without perceiving anything. Sky and water mix in a perfectly clear horizon. In the meantime, Captain Nemo walked up and down the platform without looking at me, perhaps without even seeing me. His step was assured, but less regular than usual. Sometimes he stopped, folded his arms, and looked at the sea. What was he seeking in that immense space? The Nautilus was then some 100 miles from the nearest coast. The first officer had taken up his telescope again, and was observed interrogating the horizon, coming and going, stamping and contrasting with his chief by his nervous excitement. This mystery must necessarily be soon cleared up, for, obeying an order of Captain Nemo's, the machine, increasing its propelling power, gave a more rapid rotary movement to the screw. At that moment the officer again attracted the captain's attention, who stopped his walk and directed his telescope towards the point indicated. He observed it for a long time, and I, feeling very curious about it, went down to the saloon and brought up an excellent telescope that I generally used. Then, leaning against the lantern cage that jutted out from the platform, I prepared to sweep all the line of the sky and sea. But I had not placed my eye to it when the instrument was quickly snatched out of my hands. I turned. Captain Nemo was before me, but I hardly knew him. His eyes shone with a somber fire under his frowning eyebrows. His teeth glittered between his firm-set lips. His stiffened body, closed fists, and head set hard on his shoulders showed the violent hatred breathed by his whole appearance. He did not move. My telescope, fallen from his hands, had rolled to his feet. Had I, then, unintentionally provoked this angry attitude? Did the incomprehensible personage imagine that I had surpassed some secret interdicted to the guests of the Nautilus? No, I was not the object of this hatred, for he was not looking at me. His eyes remained fixed on the impenetrable point of the horizon. At last, Captain Nemo recovered his self-possession. His face, so profoundly excited, resumed its habitual calmness. He addressed some words in a foreign tongue to his officer, then turned towards me again. "Monsieur Arnaud," he said in a rather imperious tone, I require from you the fulfillment of the one engagement that I require from you the fulfillment of one of the engagements that bind me to you." "What is that, Captain?" "To let yourself be shut up, you and your companions, until I shall think proper to set you at liberty again." "You are master here," I answered, looking at him fixedly. "But may I ask you one question?" "No, sir, not one." After that, I had nothing to do but obey, as all resistance would have been impossible. I went down to the cabin occupied by Ned Land and Conseil, and told them of the captain's determination. I leave it to be imagined how that communication was received by the Canadian. Besides, there was no time for any explanation. 4 of the crew were waiting at the door, and they conducted us all to the cell where we had passed our first nights on board the Nautilus. Ned Land wanted to expostulate, but for all in answer the door was shut upon him. Will Monsieur tell me what this means?" asked Conseil. I related what had happened to my companions. They were as astonished as I, and not more enlightened. I was overwhelmed with reflections, and the strange look on Captain Nemo's face would not go out of my head. I was incapable of putting 2 logical ideas together, and I was losing myself in the most absurd hypothesis, when I was aroused by the words of Ned Land. Why they laid out dinner for us." In fact, the table was laid. It was evident that Captain Nemo had given his order at the same time that he had paused to the speed of the Nautilus. One more again. It was evident that the captain had given this order at the same time that he caused the speed of the Nautilus to be hastened. "Will Monsieur allow me to recommend something to him?" asked Conseil. "Yes, my boy," I replied. "It is that Monsieur should breakfast. It would be prudent, for we do not know what may happen." "You are right, Conseil." "Unfortunately," said Ned Land, "they've only given us the usual fare on board." "Friend Ned, what should you say if we had had no dinner at all?" That observation cut short the harpooner's grumbling. We sat down to dinner. The meal was eaten in silence, and I ate little. Conseil forced himself to eat for prudence sake, and Ned Land ate as usual. Then, breakfast over, we made ourselves each comfortable in a corner. At that moment, the luminous globe that had been lighting us went out and left us in profound darkness. Ned Land soon went to sleep, and, what astonished me, Conseil went off into a heavy slumber as well. I was asking myself what could have provoked in him such an imperious need for sleep, when I felt a heaviness creep over my own brain. My eyes, which I wished to keep open, closed in spite of my efforts. I became prey to painful hallucinations. It was evident that a soporific substance had been mixed with the food we had just eaten. Imprisonment, then, was not enough to conceal Captain Nemo's projects from us. We must sleep as well. I heard the panels close. The undulations of the sea, that of slight rolling motions, ceased. Had the Nautilus then left the surface of the ocean? Had it again sunk to the motionless depth? I wished to resist sleep, but it was impossible. My breathing became weaker, and I felt a death-like coldness freeze and paralyze my limbs. My eyelids fell like leaden coverings over my eyes, and I could not raise them. A morbid slumber, full of hallucinations, took possession of my whole being. Then the visions disappeared and left me completely insensible. And that was chapter 19. We'll be moving now on to chapter 20. This is the pause for the ad break. Okay, the ad's probably done by now. I hope it was a good ad. I mean, I know that, you know, you could take them or leave them, but hopefully it wasn't too long. We're now moving back on to chapter 20 of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, titled The Coral Kingdom. Oh me, oh my, doesn't that sound exciting? The next day I awoke with my faculties singularly clear. To my great surprise, I was in my own room. My companions had doubtless been carried to their own without being more aware of it than I. They knew no more what happened during the night than I did, and to unveil the mystery I had only deepened on the hazards of the future. I then thought of leaving my room. Was I once more free? Was I once more free or a prisoner? Entirely free. I opened the door, went through the waist, and climbed to the central staircase. The panels, closed the night before, were opened, and I stepped onto the platform. Ned Land and Conseil were awaiting me there, and I questioned them, though they knew nothing. They had slept a dreamless sleep, and had been much more surprised to find themselves in their cabin on awakening. As to the Nautilus, it appeared to us tranquil and mysterious as usual. It was floating on the surface of the waves at a moderate speed. Nothing on board seemed changed. Ned Land watched the sea with his penetrating eyes. It was deserted. The Canadian signaled nothing fresh on the horizon, neither sail nor land. There was a stiff west breeze blowing, and the vessel was rolling under the influence of the long waves raised by the wind. Captain Nemo did not appear. Of the men on board, I only saw the emotionless steward, who served me with his usual exactitude and speechlessness. At 2 p.m., I was in the saloon, occupied in classifying my notes, when the captain opened the door and appeared. I bowed to him, and he returned it almost imperceptibly without uttering a word. I went on with my work, hoping he would perhaps give me some explanation of the events that had occurred on the previous night. He did nothing of the kind. I looked at him. His face appeared to me fatigued. His reddened eyelids showed that he had not been refreshed by sleep. His physiognomy expressed profound and real grief. He walked about, sat down, rose up, took a book at random, abandoned it immediately, consulted his instruments without making his usual notes, and did not seem able to keep an instant of peace. At last he came towards me and said, "Are you a doctor, Monsieur Arnaud?" I so little expected such a question that I looked at him for some time without answering. "Are you a doctor?" he repeated. "Yes," I said. "I'm a doctor and a surgeon. I was in practice for several years before entering the museum." "That is well." My answer had evidently satisfied Captain Nemo, but not knowing what he wanted, I awaited fresh questions, meaning to answer according to circumstance. "Monsieur Arnaud," said the captain, "will you consent to prescribe a sick man?" "There's someone ill on board?" "Yes." I am ready to follow you. Come." I must acknowledge that my heart beat faster. I do not know why I saw some connection between the illness of this man of the crew and the events of the night before, and this mystery preoccupied me at least as much as the sick man. Captain Nemo conducted me aft of the Nautilus, and made me enter a cabin situated in the crew quarters. There, upon a bed, a man of some 40 years with an energetic face and true Anglo-Saxon type was reposing. I bent over him. He was not only a sick man, but a wounded one too. His head, wrapped in bandages, was resting on a double pillow. I undid the bandages, and the wounded man, looking with his large, fixed eyes, let me do it without uttering a single complaint. The wound was horrible. The skull, crushed by some blunt instrument, showed the brain. Clots of blood had formed in the wound the color of wine dregs. The breathing of the sick man was slow, and spasmodic movements of the muscles agitated his face. I felt the pulse. It was intermittent. The extremities were already growing cold, and I saw that death was approaching without any possibility of me preventing it. After dressing the wound, I bandaged it again, and turned towards Captain Nemo. "How was this wound caused?" I asked. "What does it matter?" answered the captain evasively. A shock to the Nautilus broke one of the levers of the machine and struck this man. But what do you think of his condition?" I hesitated to reply. "You may speak," said the captain. "This man does not understand French." I looked I looked a last time at the wounded man, then I answered. "He will be dead in 2 hours." "Can nothing save him?" "Nothing." Captain Nemo clenched his hand, and his eyes, which I did not think made for weeping, filled with tears. For some time I still watched the dying man, whose life seemed gradually ebbing. He looked still paler under the electric light that bathed his deathbed, and I looked at his intelligent head, furrowed with premature lines which misfortune, misery perhaps, had long ago placed there. I tried to learn the secret of his life in the last words that escaped from his mouth. "You can go now, Monsieur Arnaud," said Captain Nemo. I left the captain in the room with the dying man, and I went back to my room much more moved by this scene. During the whole day I was agitated by a sinister presentiments. I slept badly that night, and amidst my frequent interrupted dreams, I thought I heard distant sighs and the sound like funeral chants. Was it the prayer for the dead murmured in that language which I could not understand? The next morning I went up on the deck. Captain Nemo had preceded me there. As soon as he perceived me, he came to me. "Professor," said he, "would it suit you to make a submarine excursion today?" "With my companions?" I asked. "If they like." "We are at your disposition, Captain." "Then please put on your diving dresses." I went to Ned Land and Conseil and told them of Captain Nemo's proposal. Conseil accepted it immediately, and this time the Canadian seemed quite ready to go with us. It was 8 a.m. At 1:30 we were clothed for our walk and furnished with our breathing and lighting apparatus. The double door was opened and, accompanied by Captain Nemo, who was followed by a dozen men of the crew, we set foot a depth of 10 yards on the firm ground where the Nautilus was stationed. A slight incline brought us to an undulated stretch of ground about 15 fathoms deep. The ground differed completely from any I had seen during our first excursion under the waters of the Pacific Ocean. Here there was no fine sand, no submarine meadows, no seaweed forests. I immediately recognized this region of which Captain Nemo was doing the honors. It was the kingdom of coral. We switched on our lamps and followed a coral bank in a process of formation, which, helped by time, would one day be in that portion of the Indian Ocean. The route was bordered by inextricable bushes formed from the entanglement of shrubs that the little white-starred flowers covered. But soon the bushes contracted. Real petrified thickets and long galleries of fantastic architecture opened before our steps. Captain Nemo entered a dark gallery, the inclined plane of which led us to a depth of some 100 yards. The light from our lamps sometimes produced magical effects by following rough outlines of the natural arches and pendants, like bushes which it pricked with points of fire. At last, after 2 hours walking, we reached a depth of 150 fathoms. That is to say, the extreme limit that coral begins to form itself. But there it was no longer the isolated shrub nor the modest thicket of low brushwood. It was an immense forest, the great mineral vegetations, the enormous petrified trees. We passed freely under their high branches and lost in the depth of the water, We passed freely under their high branches, lost in the depths of the water above. It was an indescribable spectacle. Oh, why would we not communicate our sensations? Why were we imprisoned under the masks and metal glasses? Why were words between us forbidden? Why did we not at least live the life of the fish that people the liquid element, or rather that of the amphibians who can traverse as they like between the domain of land and water? Real good sentence, Jules. That was a rough one. In the meantime, Captain Nemo had stopped. My companions and I imitated him, and turning round, I saw that his men formed a semicircle round the chief. Looking with more attention, I noticed that 4 of them were carrying an object of oblong form on their shoulders. We were then in the center of a vast open space surrounded by the submarine forest. Our lamps lighted up the space with a sort of twilight which immoderately lengthened the shadows of the ground. At the limit of the open space, darkness again became profound, and only was only made visible by little sparks reflected in the projections of the coral. Ned Land and Conseil were near me. We looked on, and the thought that I was going to assist at a strange scene came into my mind. As I looked at the ground, I saw that it was raised in certain places by slight mounds, encrusted by calcareous deposits, and laid out with a regularity that betrayed the hand of a man. In the center of the open space, on a pedestal of rocks roughly piled together, rose a coral cross, which extended its arms that one might have said were made of petrified blood. Upon a sign from Captain Nemo, one of his men came forward, and at some feet distance from the cross began to dig a hole with a pickaxe that he took from his belt. I then understood it all. This space was a cemetery, this hole a grave, this oblong object the body of the man who had died during the night. Captain Nemo and his men came to inter their companion in this common resting place in the depths of the inaccessible ocean. My mind was never so much excited before. More impressionable ideas had never invaded my brain. I would not see what my eyes were looking at. In the meantime, the tomb was being slowly dug. Fish fled hither and thither as their retreat was troubled. I heard on the calcareous soil the ring of the iron pickaxe that sparkled when it struck some flint lost at the bottom of the sea. The hole grew larger and wider, and was soon deep enough to receive the body. The bearers then approached. The body, wrapped in a tissue of white byssus, was lowered into the watery tomb. Captain Nemo, with his arms crossed on his chest, and all the friends of a man who had loved them, knelt in the attitude of prayer. My two companions and I bent religiously. The tomb was then filled with the matter dug from the soil, and formed a slight mound. When this was done, Captain Nemo and his men rose. Then, collecting round the tomb, all knelt again, and extended their hands in a sign of supreme adieu. Then the funeral procession was out for the Nautilus again, repassing under the arcades of the forest amidst the thickets by the sides of the coral bushes, going uphill all the way. At last the lights on board appeared. Their luminous track guided us to the Nautilus. We were back at 1 o'clock. As soon as I had changed my clothes, I went up to the platform, and, a prey of a terrible conflict of emotions, I went and seated myself near the lantern cage. Captain Nemo joined me there. I rose and said, "Then, as I foresaw, that man died in the night?" "Yes, Mr. Arno," answered Captain Nemo. "And now he is resting by the side of his companions in the coral cemetery?" "Yes, forgotten by everyone but us. We dig a grave, and the polypi take the trouble of sealing our dead therein for eternity." And hiding his face in his hands with a brusque gesture, the captain tried in vain to suppress a sob. Then he added, "That is our peaceful cemetery, at some hundreds of feet below the surface of the waves. Your dead sleep, at least, tranquil, Captain, out of the reach of sharks." "Yes, sir," answered Captain Nemo gravely, "of sharks and men." And that is not only the end of chapter 20, but the end of part 1. Next time we read, we're going to be moving into part 2. What awaits us in part 2? Well, hopefully not more people getting, big dead. Sorry, nameless guy who got hit by a lever. It's real rough in the ocean, but sometimes you get bonked so hard that you die from it. Unless you're not in a submarine. I'm not going to die like that because I'll never be in a submarine. But, yeah, that was an interesting chapter. Didn't expect to see Captain Nemo so emotional, but you know what? He seems like the kind of person who really cares about his crew, and we respect him for that, even if he does shoot otters sometimes, which does make him a big bad man. We don't like that. If you don't like Captain Nemo shooting an otter, but you do like him being emotionally vulnerable, get in the comments and let us know your thoughts. If you think that Monsieur Arnaud being a surgeon and then walking up and being like, sorry, his brain's all broke up, that's just, what a rough putt of that one. I'm a doctor, I can help. Ooh, no way. He's toast. Sorry about that, Captain. But anyway, to save you from my yammering, I'll give our little sign off. If you liked everything that you saw in the video, or didn't like things you saw in the video, let me know in the comments. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the little notification bell icon if you want to see my face pop up on your phone screen and be like, wow, a new video! Or my mother, she also will be there and she'll be like, a new video. Or I'll be like, a new video. But until then, hit the little bell icon and you'll see me pop up sometimes, and that'll be funny. I'll jump scare you whenever you are, wherever you are. But until then, I'll be coming for you. See ya. Bye.